In 1986, Metallica bassist Cliff Burton was thrown from their bus after their driver lost control on the road. But when frontman James Hetfield went to look at the scene of the crash, he made a chilling discovery. Cliff Burton was the revolutionary bassist for the metal band Metallica. However, a freak fatal accident ended his career before he had the chance to truly shred. For being one of the most influential bassists of all time, Cliff Burton had an inauspicious beginning. He was born in Castro Valley, California in February 1962 to Raymond and Jeanette Burton. He was the youngest of 3 siblings. His older brother and sister were named Scott and Connie. When Burton burst onto the heavy metal scene, he captivated rockers everywhere with his unconventional playing style. The truth, however, is that he was always kind of unconventional. His parents were allegedly hippies who raised him to be easygoing. That wasn't the only influence they had on him. Growing up, Burton's house wasn't exactly a musical one. That is, until his father delved into the world of classical music. Burton was so fascinated by the sounds of Bach and Beethoven that he began taking piano lessons. This was his gateway to a much more rock and roll lifestyle. As Burton got older, his interest in music grew. By the time he was a teenager, he had developed a love for all genres, not just classical music. He gravitated towards country, rock, and of course, heavy metal. Little did he know, a family tragedy was about to drastically alter the course of his life. When Burton was just 13 years old, his family would have to endure an inexplicable tragedy. Burton's older brother, Scott, suffered a brain aneurysm that claimed his life at just 16. Thankfully, Burton had a productive way of coping with the devastating loss. Instead of wallowing in bed and throwing himself under the covers over the loss of his brother, Burton buried himself in his love of music. In fact, it was his brother's untimely death that led Burton to make a decision that would change his life and music history forever. He picked up the bass guitar. Burton was deeply impacted by the loss of his brother, so deeply that he dedicated the rest of his life to him. Burton's parents recalled his deep dedication to his brother's memory. They overheard him saying, "I'm going to be the best bassist for my brother." Suffices to say, he had high hopes for his future in music. Of course, he still had a long way to go. According to his mother, the family did not see him as much of a musician. We didn't think he had too much talent at all. And she wasn't necessarily wrong. According to his mother, Burton struggled through the first months of learning to play bass guitar. His fingers must have been bleeding. One thing was certain, however, whatever talent Burton did or did not have paled in comparison to his work ethic and dedication to his craft. In fact, he was borderline fanatical about it. As a young teen, he practiced playing the bass guitar for anywhere between 4 and 6 hours a day. He continued that intense practice schedule as a member of Metallica years later. As his bass playing capabilities grew, Burton found himself gravitating towards jazz and blues music in addition to country and rock. There was no doubt by that time that he was developing a unique sound and style for the bass guitar. For a heavy metal bassist, his influences were surprising. There's no question, Burton had his own unique style of bass guitar. That's probably because he learned from some of the best. His influences included rock legends like Lemmy Kilmister and Geddy Lee, though his biggest influence was shocking. He really did sit down, his mother said, and study and play Bach. He loved Bach. Once Burton learned to play bass guitar, there was no stopping him. He knew, even as a high school student at Castro Valley High School, that he wanted to be a musician. So, along with some of his friends, he started up the band Easy Street. Their name was, you might say, revealing. Long before he rocked on stage with Metallica, Cliff Burton was already drawn to the darker, more rebellious side of life. His high school band Easy Street was a reflection of that edgy spirit, not just in sound, but also in name. The teenage musicians cheekily borrowed their name from a well-known adult-themed bar in the Bay Area, a bold choice that hinted at their mischievous streak. But their confidence wasn't just for show. Behind the provocative name were young but undeniably talented musicians, proving that their skills matched their audacious attitude. Burton wasn't the only member of Easy Street to go on to make rock and roll history. Jim Martin and Mike Burton would become members of Faith No More. Burton forged a very strong friendship with Martin, continuing to collaborate with him through college. They would be friends for Burton's entire life. Around this time, Burton formed Agents of Misfortune with Martin, and they entered their first big musical competition, a Battle of the Bands contest. Fortunately, the contest was recorded and has provided metal fans with an early glimpse of Burton's revolutionary style. There are even echoes of his later bass solos in For Whom the Bell Tolls in this early recording. Clearly, Burton was gearing up to take on a bigger stage. In 1982, Burton made an important career move. He joined the professional metal band Trauma and stepped into a recording studio for the first time. His recording of Such a Shame made it into a compilation album called Metal Massacre. Little did he know, he already had some very important fans. 1982 kept the surprises coming for Burton. Alongside his Trauma bandmates, he made the trip to Los Angeles to play at a renowned nightclub. Unbeknownst to him, two members of the audience that night were none other than Metallica's James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, watching closely from the crowd. Hetfield and Ulrich listened in awe as Burton rocked out on stage. Hetfield in particular couldn't get over Burton's amazing shredding and knew that he had to have that sound in his band. Without even a moment's hesitation, Hetfield and Ulrich both agreed Burton was Metallica material. After his performance, Hetfield and Ulrich approached Burton with their offer: join Metallica and shred bass with the big boys. Unbeknownst to Burton, Metallica's previous bassist Ron McGovney had recently left the band, so Hetfield and Ulrich were in a somewhat desperate situation. Turns out the timing was perfect for Burton as well. Burton hadn't been with Trauma for long, but it was long enough to know that he wouldn't be in that band forever. Despite the fact that Trauma had given him his first real foray into professional music, he felt that they were starting to get a little commercial. So with that, he agreed to join Metallica, on one condition. Burton was excited at the prospect of joining Metallica, but there was one problem. Metallica was a Los Angeles-based band, and Burton was a Bay Area bassist. He told Hetfield and Ulrich that he would only consider joining the band if they uprooted their lives and moved to San Francisco. Their response was surprising. Instead of telling the young bassist to take a hike, Metallica's Hetfield and Ulrich took a hike themselves, straight to San Francisco. As per Burton's request, they left Los Angeles and settled in El Cerrito, just across the bay from downtown San Francisco. They didn't waste any time putting Burton to work. Burton immediately recorded a demo, Megaforce, with Metallica to introduce the metal world to their new sound. However, it was another one of Metallica's demos, No Life Till Leather, that made it to the ears of John Zazula, also known as Johnny Z. Zazula just so happened to be the owner of Megaforce Records, and he liked what he heard. Unfortunately for Burton, the band didn't stay in the San Francisco Bay Area for long. Shortly after joining forces, the whole band moved out to Old Bridge, New Jersey. They then signed a record deal with Johnny Z and immediately began causing trouble. Burton debuted his unique bass-playing style to the whole world on the band's first album. His solo in Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, for example, saw him doing something almost no bassist ever did: use effect pedals and electro-harmonics Big Muff. There was, however, a little controversy over the first album. Burton and his Metallica bandmates initially had a bold and provocative title in mind for their debut album. metal up your, well, let's just say, a place where the sun doesn't shine. The band was eager to make a statement and add a little bit of shock value to their album's name. The title was actually inspired by an earlier demo released before Burton joined the group. However, not everyone was on board with the idea. While record labels were accustomed to controversial band and album names from their metal musicians, Megaforce Records thought that Metallica had taken it a bit too far. They insisted that Burton and his bandmates change the name of their debut album to something a little less graphic. Burton clearly did not understand the assignment. When his Metallica bandmates informed him that the record label wanted them to change the name of their album, Burton offered up a classic reply. "We should just kill 'em all, man," he said. Without intending to, he had just given the band the new, even more controversial name for their album, Kill 'Em All. Then they did. By the time Metallica's second album, Ride the Lightning, came out, it was obvious who the star of the band was. Burton had helped advance the band's style and sound, and was largely responsible for writing the songs. His talents shined most in the singles For Whom the Bell Tolls and Call of Cthulhu. Bigger things were just around the corner. Burton truly established his sound in Ride the Lightning, and some very important people had taken note. Major record labels could no longer ignore the ear-splitting shredding coming from the young bassist's guitar. Metallica signed a deal with Elektra Records and immediately got to work recording their third studio album. For Burton, it would be a high point and an end point. With the backing of a major record label, Metallica's third album, Master of Puppets, catapulted the young musicians to stardom. Not only was the album a major commercial success, but music critics and fans alike have come to see it as a landmark album in heavy metal history, and one that forever altered how metal sounds. Burton's prominent bass in tracks like Orion became instant classics. Sadly, he wouldn't be riding the lightning for much longer. Even though Metallica had met with moderate success before, their third album, Master of Puppets, was their true commercial breakthrough. Tragically, however, the third time would not necessarily be the charm for Burton. Master of Puppets would end up being his last album and his final performance. To promote their album, Metallica went on a tour across Europe, but it wasn't all glamorous. The Damage Inc. tour turned out to be a grind, with members of the band, including Burton, complaining about their accommodation. Burton and others argue that their tour bus bunks were unsatisfactory and uncomfortable. The bunks on the tour bus were so uncomfortable that Burton and his bandmates turned it into a game, competing to see who would end up with the worst spot. As the band made their way through Sweden on that fateful night in late September, accounts of what exactly transpired vary. But one thing remains undeniable: it ended in tragedy for Burton and the band. According to Burton's fellow Metallica guitarist Kirk Hammett, Burton's untimely demise came down to luck of the draw. Hammett claimed that he and Burton drew cards to decide who would get to choose the bunk they wanted. So when Burton picked the highest card, the ominous Ace of Spades, the choice was his. That choice would seal his fate. After drawing the Ace of Spades, Burton playfully told Hammett, "I want your bunk." Hammett, not too pleased with the decision, replied, "Fine, take my bunk. I'll sleep up front. It's probably better anyway." He had no idea how right he was. One of Burton's original Metallica bandmates, Lars Ulrich, remembers things a little differently. According to him, Burton's demise wasn't the result of the Ace of Spades, but rather a short straw. Allegedly, Burton and Hammett had drawn straws, with Burton drawing the longer one and thus opting to take Hammett's bunk. Regardless, tragedy was closer than anyone knew. As the bus wound its way through the dark country roads in the wee hours of a late September morning, Burton was fast asleep in Hammett's bunk. Then, tragedy struck. The bus swerved out of control, ultimately sliding right off the road and flipping onto a grassy field. The carnage was unimaginable. Burton and his bandmates had been right to complain about the safety of the bunks. They didn't have any restraints. So when the bus lurched off the road and began flipping, the momentum launched Burton through a bus window. As if that wasn't bad enough, what happened next was downright heartbreaking. If Burton hadn't drawn the high card or the long straw, he might have survived what happened next. After Burton went through the window, the bus tragically kept rolling and didn't come to a stop until after it landed directly on top of him. The only mercy was that he died instantly. At just 24 years old, his career and adult life had only just begun. In the immediate aftermath of the horrific accident, Burton's bandmates were in a state of shock and wanted answers. The bus driver wanted to avoid taking the fall for ending the life of the young bass player. He claimed that the bus had hit a patch of black ice. But there were some holes in his story. Burton's bandmate, James Hetfield, was convinced that the bus driver wasn't telling the truth about what caused the accident. Suspecting that the driver was impaired, he walked back up the road, determined to prove there were no patches of black ice. Tragically, he was likely right. Burton had lost his life due to someone else's reckless judgment. Later that morning, a freelance photographer visited the crash site, already infamous in the wake of the tragedy. When he recounted what he witnessed, he confirmed what Hetfield had suspected, that there was no ice on the road as the temperature had remained above freezing. So, what really caused the accident that ended Burton's promising career?
For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factinate member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details.
Swedish authorities later confirmed what Burton's bandmates knew to be true. There was no ice on the road. Instead, detectives found tire tracks at the scene of the horrific crash that told them one thing: the driver had likely fallen asleep. But it would be Burton who would never wake up. Despite the evidence against him, Burton's tour bus driver claimed that he was fully rested, having slept throughout the day. Another one of the band's crew confirmed the bus driver's story, ultimately leading the authorities to decide that he was not at fault for Burton's untimely and tragic end. After the tragic accident, the whole metal world was in mourning. In tribute to their fallen bandmate, Metallica wrote the song "To Live Is to Die" and released it on their fourth studio album, "And Justice for All." Heartbroken at their loss, they gave Burton a writing credit for some of the lyrics in the song and used some of his previous recordings that they hadn't released to compose a bass medley. When Megadeth learned about Burton's passing, they were almost as devastated as his Metallica bandmates. Allegedly, Megadeth co-founder Dave Mustaine was so moved by Burton's tragic accident that he wrote the lyrics for "In My Darkest Hour" in one sitting. However, it's not clear that the lyrics he wrote had anything directly to do with Burton's demise. Despite the brevity of his career, Burton had a profound impact on heavy metal music and bass guitarists. In April 2009, his extraordinary contributions were recognized when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He joined his original Metallica bandmates, James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, and Kirk Hammett, in receiving the honor, a well-deserved tribute to his lasting influence on the genre. Of course, Burton himself could not attend this crowning achievement of his career. However, his father, Ray Burton, went up on the stage with the other members of Metallica on his son's behalf. He emotionally stated that Burton's mother had been, and still was, Metallica's biggest fan. They had the most touching way of honoring their son's memory. Music had saved Burton's life after his brother's fatal aneurysm. It was only fitting then that his parents sought to do the same for others. Quietly and without anyone's knowledge, Burton's parents had been donating all of his royalty payments to his former high school's music scholarship fund, continuing to share their son's music and legacy with the world. Cliff Burton's life was brief, but his impact on music was undeniable. In just a few short years, he redefined what it meant to be a bassist in heavy metal, blending classical influences and raw power to create a sound that was entirely his own. His work with Metallica helped shape the future of the genre, leaving behind a legacy that still resonates today. If you enjoyed this Fact Neat video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want a say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.